Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another hour of Healthy Conclusions, where we try to give our listeners important information on nutrition, exercise, and holistic, alternative, and integrative medicine. Please take a minute to visit our website at www.healthyconclusions.com and like us on Facebook. My name is Bob Neugebauer, and I will be your host for this evening's show. Tonight's show is being brought to you by Altrua Health Share, which has been serving its members and their families with their health care needs since 1997. Please take a moment to visit their website at altruahealthshare.org or call 888-244-3839 to see just what Altrua Health Share can offer for your family's health care needs. It could mean substantial savings. Tonight we're going to broach on a difficult subject with two of our local physicians, Dr. Corinne Bottrell, who is a doctor of naturopathy, iridologist, holistic nutritionist, and naturopathic health services, and is an educational psychologist and consultant, and Dr. Hartford, who was a family medicine doctor and has had a lot of experience in patient psychiatric background in addiction. He is also a naturopathic doctor. The subject of our conversation tonight will be what part have psychotropic drugs played in mass shootings. Welcome, Dr. Bottrell and Dr. Hartford, to Healthy Conclusions, and thank you for taking the time to be with us this evening. We're going to start off tonight with a short statement by me that may surprise some people. Nearly every mass shooting incident in the last 20 years and multiple other instances of suicide and isolated shootings all share one thing in common. And it's not that weapons were used. The overwhelming evidence points to the single largest common factor in all of these incidents is the fact that all of the perpetrators were either actively taking powerful psychotropic drugs or had been in some point in the immediate past before they committed their crimes. So let's start off with Dr. Bottrell. What is your opinion of this statement, and do you agree with it? Because looking at the events and the stats, it is a fairly true statement.
Yes, Bob. I am aware of the research tying high-profile shootings to psychotropic medications. There are 27 international drug regulatory warnings on psychiatric medications citing effects such as mania, hostility, violence, and homicide ideation. The pharmaceutical companies, they know this. I believe the focus should be more on mental illness in America.
What about you, Dr. Hartford?
Having followed patients outpatient, typically for anxiety or depression, and I had experience at Intermountain Hospital in Boise as a medical consultant on their inpatient unit, combination of illicit street drugs and or antidepressants, antipsychotics, or anxiolytics disinhibits people and allows a lot of socially terrible behavior.
So it basically inhibits them from doing the right thing and tends them towards doing the wrong things?
Impairs their judgment, certainly.
Okay. Would either of you be surprised to hear that there are multiple credible scientific studies going on more than a decade, as well as internal documents from certain pharmaceutical companies that suppressed the information showing that SSRI, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, have well-known but unreported side effects, including but not limited to suicide and other violent behavior? Why do you think we never hear about these studies, but we hear all the latest casualties from gun violence?
That may be more a problem with what's selected to be put on the news rather than a lack of studies from the past, because I had the fortune of starting my medical career and my private practice at the time that Prozac was first released as an antidepressant. And at that time they told us they didn't even know how it worked. That it had something to do with serotonin uptake receptors. And after that initial prototypical drug, several copycat drugs came out, and it was well known from the beginning that they can be energizing have impact on presumably instinctive behaviors like sexual function. If you take a person who is a depressed person and they sleep a lot, they don't eat, they lay around, and you energize them in the setting of what's on TV, what time of video games they play, and as they come back into the real world, I think the edges between what's real and what's not gets blurred.
Well, don't you feel that, or even think, that the reason we hear about the guns and not the drugs is because of the commercial advertising by the drug companies on the various media stations? They seem to monopolize a very good portion of the prime time. Dr. Petrell?
Yes, in fact, you can't watch any program without having it interrupted and having a commercial on medications. And one of the things that I've noticed when I hear those commercials is at the very end, after they tell you how wonderful the medications are and the benefits of taking the medication, all of a sudden the speech increases and you hear a monologue of very quickly, which is even hard to even catch, of all the side effects. And I think that that's one of the things that they're having to do now, is to notify people about the side effects of these dangerous medications.
Do you think the drug companies are reasonably honest even when they put out those warnings that they're giving you everything that you need to know?
Absolutely not. No, I don't believe they do.
Why do you think that is? Are they that afraid of telling you what it could do to you? Or don't they know?
I believe they know, Bob. I do. They do the studies and they suppress the information. And I believe that they're able to deal with the lawsuits that happen. They make more money selling the drugs, and the settling lawsuits from side effects they see as an expense, part of an expense of marketing the drugs.
Well, we certainly saw that with Vioxx when they killed literally hundreds of thousands and paid a $600 million fine but made $4 billion on it.
Exactly.
Well, they're still dealing with that, I think. When we look at history, the history of mass shootings, the common denominator for many of the perpetrators who were children is some sort of drug use. Are the drugs we give our kids nowadays safe, or should we be concerned because we don't know the full effects of many of these drugs due to misrepresentations and under-testing by the drug companies? Dr. Hartford?
A drug company can make a statement that sounds true by manipulating statistics from studies. They can make medication sound twice as powerful even if there's a 1 or 2% change in a given population. And side effects on antidepressant and antipsychotic medications are often the setting of multiple drugs being used, and it's uncertain whether there's potentiation of side effects or simply treating side effects caused by the initial medication. And really clean research study looking at individual medications these days, I think, are relatively impossible. Along the lines of the Vioxx, when Purdue produced OxyContin, they came out and lied to physicians and the public about the risk of addiction, saying it was only 5 to 15%, when actually it was much more like 74%. And again, they had a $2 billion fine, but Purdue had made $12 million on OxyContin.
Well, are you telling me that if they mix two drugs with the same patient, they could get a totally different reaction than any of the things they might have expected to happen?
Certainly, most of the older antidepressants are notorious for causing cardiac dysrhythmias, and the new atypical antipsychotics can cause movement disorders. The side effects tend to have anticholinergic side effects, which means dry mouth, constipation, but also slowed thinking and impaired mentation.
Dr. Petrell, you're a psychologist, and I know you work with children all the time in the autistic field. Have you found this to be true also, that you find these children, some of them on 2 or 3 different drugs at one time?
Yes. Bob, there are many children who do take these medications without having the negative side effects that you are describing. Some of these medications have actually been life-saving for many and have improved the quality of life for those who suffer from mental illness. Having said that, my concern is exactly what you're saying, is when a child is being prescribed a stimulant medication, say for the treatment of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and if you take that medication long enough, you become depressed, so an antidepressant is added. Down the road, we begin to see mood swings, and then additionally a mood stabilizer is added. And this cocktail of drugs is very common. I see it all the time, and I believe contributes to the downward spiral of many of these children and possibly leads to the side effects you describe.
We're going to have to take a quick break, but we'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Health Conclusions, brought to you by Altrua Health Share, with your host Bob Neugebauer on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. Welcome back to Healthy Conclusions on 580 KIDO. We're speaking with Dr. Corinne Petrell and Dr. Hartford, and we're talking about psychotropic drugs and our children. So let's get along here a little bit and take a look in some past history. Before the late 1980s, mass shootings and acts of senseless violence were relatively unheard of. Prozac, which is one of the most well-known SSRI drugs, antidepressants, was not yet on the market, and subsequently mass shootings and other violent incidents started to be reported when they did come on. More often than not, the common denominator was that the shooters were on an antidepressant or withdrawing from one. Is this the fault of Big Pharma for not doing enough research on the SSRI medications, or a clear-cut problem with diagnosis and the wrong medications? Dr. Hartford.
It's hard to say if this is Big Pharma's problem or if it's American society's problem. I think most of us like a quick, easy fix, something that's convenient. Take a pill once a day. I believe tons of research has been done. They've made it clear the risk of increasing the risk of suicide, or even a police-assisted suicide where you're taking other lives along with your own. Whether the problem was Prozac or the fact that you can instantly be on Facebook, YouTube, all the news stations, and really make a name for yourself as you're ending your life. I'm not sure what it is, but looking back at Mike Adams' article in Natural News, just the list of crimes, suicides, always in the setting of antidepressant medications or antipsychotropic use, it's difficult to tease out one variable. But the fact that that variable's present with all those number of cases over the year, it's part of the problem.
Yeah, when I look at that article, you start looking at children who have committed these crimes in the age range from 13 to 17, even some as young as 12. That's kind of scary, and it makes you wonder, are we doing the right thing by giving drugs to these kids? And again, I can't condemn the research because I wasn't there when they were doing it. But certainly there's something wrong with the predictions of what would happen when these drugs are given to these kids. Dr. Petrell?
Yes, and I think the fact that we live in such a violent society, the video games that these children engage in are horrific and very graphic, and certainly the movies that are being shown even on television. There's just violence is pervasive, and I think that also contributes to the impulsivity and the response to dealing with frustration and anger with these children.
Do you think part of that is a problem with the schools and the teaching methods we use nowadays that we see these kids getting depressed, or do you think it's part of the home life? You know, most parents nowadays, they use the schools as a daycare center, and they expect the teachers to be bringing their children up in a lot of cases. Do you think this is kind of part of it, that they've lost that family atmosphere, those family values where they sit down and actually talk to each other at a dinner table?
I think that that's one of the factors. I don't think that that explains the reason why we're seeing so much detachment. I think it's multifactorial, and I think that that's just a small piece of why we're seeing it.
And then again, we see all this technology where most of the kids I see nowadays have their heads buried in a phone. You know, is that part and parcel of what's going on because of the tech rage and what's happening, the bullying and everything electronically? Is that part and parcel of what's happening with our children? Dr. Hartford?
I believe that's part of it. Pushing children to excel at school with the thought in mind that even in elementary school, parents are looking towards college and future careers. High grades are important throughout your educational career.
So you think we push these kids a little bit too hard?
Everybody gets pushed pretty hard in this country, whether you work for, your employer or you're trying to please your teacher. We all use little things to help us cope, whether it's coffee, cigarettes, power drinks, energy drinks.
So they all play a part.
Definitely.
So it's those stimulants against the depressants. You have to wonder, why do you take either one of them?
Yeah, partly that, and then it's increasingly apparent, especially as a naturopath, the impacts of foods in our diet. People actually get addicted to carbohydrates, get addicted to sugar. Most things that we enjoy doing are to get us out of withdrawal. When you get up in the morning, have that cup of coffee, it's because you're in caffeine withdrawal. People that are struggling to quit smoking, the main reason they smoke is to get out of nicotine withdrawal. And there are so many different types of symptoms from withdrawal from antipsychotic medications or antidepressants. And these days you go in to see your allopathic medical doctor. You have some problem with upset stomach or nausea or that terrible pain in the pit of your stomach. And part of that is mediated by neurotransmitters, and certainly taking a medication that balances or increases the levels of those neurotransmitters have an impact on your brain, but they also have an impact on your gut and your ability to sleep at night, have normal energy during the day. It's another variable that complicates the picture.
So let's look at this in perspective. You've got family life that's changed dramatically, where the kids are being shuttled to school. The teachers are expected to raise the kids. We have a drug situation where they're giving these kids drugs at very young ages, not knowing how they're going to react to them. We have a nutrition problem that nobody seems to want to deal with withdrawal symptoms in a lot of different areas. How do these kids actually make it through life? I mean, it seems like it's going to be just a hardship getting through school. Dr. Bertrell?
Well, I think the most important thing when children, before they even go to school, is breakfast, and a nutritious breakfast. And we are finding that a lot of these children not only aren't getting fed, they also don't come to school with lunches as well. And I think that was one of the reasons why they implemented the programs where children could come and eat breakfast at school, because we know that it's hard to concentrate and focus when your stomach is empty and your focus is on how hungry you are. And I think it's really sad that they are considering dropping those programs, because it's not the children's fault. It's a society issue.
Well, I also know that many of our children, I would say probably 30% of them, have a problem with obesity.
Yes, good point.
And
Yes.
and this is created by bad diets in a lot of cases and zero exercise.
Right, and it's not because they're eating too much. It's the type of foods that they are eating that are contributing to that. We also, several years ago, dropped physical education from the curriculum in our schools. And so the exercise they get is with their thumbs playing video games. And I feel that that's another sad loss for our children is when they drop PE. And my hope is someday they will recognize that and re-implement the need for exercise.
Well, I think it's going to be up to the parents to make the changes, and I think a lot of this has to do with federal intertwinings with our school system. If we didn't have all those intertwinings, we wouldn't have as many problems because there are just too many mandates. Let's get on to the next question. Many of our children are diagnosed at a very young age with ADHD or depression and are taking Zoloft or other drugs for these conditions. Aren't these drugs just masking the symptoms of this child's or these children's problems rather than helping them solve them? Dr. Hartford?
I'm still trying to think of a good way to explain masking symptoms versus treating deficiencies, whether they're minerals, vitamins, neurotransmitters. A lot of medications are given to children for social reasons, so they'll behave in school, so they'll sit in their chair, so they'll pay attention. The stimulants in a child with ADD, if too strong of a dose is given, they're actually sitting there like a zombie, has impact on their appetite, their ability to sleep. So it masks symptoms and they fit into the classroom and they fit into society, but the risks of not being able to eat when you're a small child and you're trying to grow are significant. And my experience from year to year is it depends more on a child's teacher and her ability to deal with individual different types of children rather than saying every energetic child has hyperactivity and needs to be medicated so that I can control my classroom.
We're going to have to take a quick break. We'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Health Conclusions, brought to you by Altrua Health Share with your host Bob Neugebauer on 580 KIDOAM and 107.5 FM. Welcome back to Health Conclusions on 580 KIDO. We're speaking with Dr. Corinne Bottrell and Dr. Jeff Hartford. And we are sponsored by Altrua Health Share. Our subject today is psychotropic drugs. So we were discussing the teachers and how they react with the children. Maybe they're just too much of a handful, and maybe they just want to put them in a pigeonhole. But when you look at the fact that school districts receive as much as $1,000 per child of federal money for children that have been diagnosed with ADHD and similar illnesses, if that child is at least 2 years below grade level, do you believe these acts, or this acts as an incentive for school officials to be too quick on the trigger when diagnosing? And do you think teachers, doctors, and psychologists will be pressured to diagnose ADHD because of these incentives? Dr. Bottrell.
Well, Bob, when a child is diagnosed with ADHD, unless it significantly impacts their academic performance, they will not qualify for special education services. The $1,000 per child that you refer to actually doesn't even touch the amount of money required for the services provided to support that student. Our districts are overwhelmed with the needs of these students. Once a child is deemed eligible for services, the district is required by law to provide the services needed to remediate the disability, regardless of the cost. Most people are unaware that the cost of an assessment alone runs between $2,500 to $3,000 for a diagnosis of ADHD in the school district.
So they get $1,000, but we have to spend $2,500 to $3,000.
Exactly.
And where does that money come from? It comes from our taxes, am I correct?
That is correct, yes.
So are we creating a bigger tax burden on ourselves, too, with all of these diagnoses that are taking place for ADHD? Do you think they're being done in a proper manner? Or are some of these just because they don't want disruption in the classrooms? Dr. Hartford?
No, it's not just about disruption in the classroom. And we're looking at children today, and there are so many different psycho-emotional issues on our plate with autism spectrum, Asperger's syndrome, attention deficit disorder, social anxiety, and depression. I don't think we're really just medicating kids to get along in school. It's the mindset of people has been misdirected by the pharmaceutical company, and it seems like the best way to go. And so these incentives are really very subtle. A doctor or psychologist or someone spends all their time getting education, maintaining continuing education credits without, and this was true for me. I didn't really think about who is teaching me that. And of course, you look back, and it's a pharmaceutical company sharing their big studies. And you're in the setting of a medical conference, and all the doctors try to be on the same page. There's a standard of care that is attempted to be reached. And as a different perspective, as a naturopath, if you just stop back and say, wait, our food sources are not healthy for us anymore. Synthetic vitamins are not like the vitamins we get from whole foods. There is a big difference in organic and non-organic meat. If you just think about the only fertilizer they put on most plants is nitrogen, when actually you need trace minerals. There's a host of other minerals we need from the earth that we've depleted, and as a society, we're all walking around unhealthy.
Well, I have to say, I treat my lawn better than most people treat their cornfields, and I get green grass.
I'm sure.
So you don't think the answer to fixing this problem is more money, or is it the fact that we are diagnosing these kids and possibly misdiagnosing them? Because if you look at the numbers of children that have these diseases, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 6.4 million. And of that 6.4 million, the estimate is that 20% of them are misdiagnosed. That's a huge number. Why is that? Dr. Bertrell.
I believe that some symptoms of hyperactivity are certainly due to food allergies, sugar, food additives, etc. However, I don't believe that diagnosis is the problem. I believe the problem is the treatment. There are many children and adults who are diagnosed with ADHD who are not medicated and are leading successful, happy lives. And there are many forms of treatment for ADHD that don't include medication, such as which Dr. Hartford was mentioning, but also neurofeedback and natural nutritional supplements. And we also know that omega-3s are also helpful in coping with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
So you think it would make a difference if we were to treat these diagnosed children with a more integrative approach than just shoving pills down their throats? Dr. Hartford?
Certainly. Biofeedback for the brain, which is neurofeedback, has been amazing to me, especially working with children. We have a little 4-year-old girl no longer having seizures. Her other behavior problems are improving. We have a few little 6-year-old boys that are doing neurofeedback. It's a simple procedure, and I'm kind of pleased I was exposed to biofeedback way back in the 80s during my education. And it's an underutilized tool. It's cheap, it's simple. The pharmaceutical companies aren't making any money. And then back again to the nutrition part. And as a naturopath, I'm being taught to address nutrition in different ways. The question of cholesterol, healthy fats in the diet, ketones, sugar addiction, it's just a complicated picture.
Dr. Burchell, do you think this is what it's all about? I know you treat a lot of children in your practice, and I'm sure that you see all kinds coming through your office from time to time. Do you believe we actually have to change our approach, and that the integrative approach where we look at the best of both worlds to work with the kids is better than just the pill theory, which is what most doctors, allopaths, learn in medical school?
Yes, absolutely. And I believe that the prognosis is very good for children diagnosed, especially with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And besides developing strategies to compensate for attention deficits, improving the nutrition of these children, providing nutritional supplements, have shown to improve symptoms of even children on the spectrum. Changing their diet, we're finding that food sensitivities and intolerances look like attention deficit as far as behavior is concerned. And when you discover what it is that is causing some of their behaviors by changing their nutrition and their diet, we see significant improvement.
But I find it difficult to see a change in nutrition when you're dealing with, now let's just take, for instance, we have about 20% of the people in this state who are on Medicaid expansion or are on Medicaid or want to be on Medicaid expansion should that have happened. That's a lot of people. We're talking 300,000, and most of those are in low-income brackets. Many of them are on the SNAP program. And the SNAP program has no requirements for nutritional values on what people purchase at the store. Now, don't you think the government would be smart enough to see these factors, or that they just don't care and want to leave well enough alone for the voting public? Dr. Hartford.
I'm sure they care, but the problem is overwhelming. Talking to disadvantaged single mothers with multiple children, they're all hungry, and basically you buy the food that's easiest to fix, that is convenient, and it's full of sugar, it's full of preservatives, and I can't imagine the government restricting people's personal choice of what they choose to eat, but we have so many poor choices available that are less expensive than the right thing to do.
So the problem goes back to the corporate level and the profit motive, and they're just going to sell us whatever we want and make it taste good so that we'll eat it, whether it's Coca-Cola that has 12 spoonfuls of sugar in it or aspartame that kills ants. This is the problem we're dealing with. This is a real problem because it's at the root of why we have such a sick country, and we're number 37 in the world in health. I think that's a big part of it. We have an opioid crisis, and 60,000 users of opioids OD every year. But in this case, we're seeing 11% of our children between the ages of 4 and 17 who diagnosed with ADHD, or as I said, 6.4 million earlier. How do we misdiagnose 1 million of those children? It's such a substantial number, I have a hard time getting over it. Dr. Burchell.
Well, like I said earlier, I don't believe that it's a diagnosis problem. It's more of what the choice is as far as treatment. And I think when we start thinking more of society in general and community health and educating people about food additives and the chemicals that we are eating, it's actually repulsive when you read some of the ingredients in some of these packages. And I think as we get back to looking at the side effects of processed foods, we're going to learn that a lot of these behaviors are a result of the foods that we're eating. And that's why nutrition and healthy nutrition is so important.
We have to take a quick break. We'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Health Conclusions, brought to you by Altrua Health Share with your host, Bob Neugebauer, on 580 KIDO-AM and 107.5 FM. Welcome back to Healthy Conclusions on 580 KIDO. We're speaking with Dr. Corinne Bottrill and Dr. Jeff Hartford. Your sponsor here is Altrua Health Share, and we're speaking about psychotropic drugs, ADHD, and currently nutrition. So we've gotten through the nutrition situation. We know we all have bad nutrition. Very few of us eat organically. Now, Dr. Bottrill, as a clinical psychologist, what are the chances of children recovering from this illness and leading normal lives? And I'd like you to take it from the perspective of an allopathic method of cure and a naturopathic method of cure.
Well, Bob, the allopathic treatment of medication is not a cure. And what it is doing, like you mentioned earlier, about masking symptoms and making a child perhaps focus a little bit better and be more cooperative, but it doesn't cure the underlying problem. Whereas naturopathic medicine or integrative medicine really looks at what is causing the child to misbehave. Is it a food allergy? Are there family issues that are impacting the child? From a naturopathic perspective, I believe the prognosis is really very good for children diagnosed with ADHD. And I think if we teach children strategies to compensate for their attention deficits, improve their nutrition, provide nutritional supplements, I think we can, which will have improve the symptoms of attention deficit. I think we'd see a whole different child.
So you think that we would see a different result or a more efficacious result using a naturopathic way?
Absolutely.
Dr. Hartford, as far as cost effectiveness goes, and everybody worries about cost because somebody has to pay the bill in the end, where do you think it comes down, either on the allopathic or the integrative medicine side, that you get the most bang for your buck?
Certainly, you get the most bang for your buck with the naturopathic approach because you're improving your immune system, you're dealing with illnesses, you're not getting heavier every day, you're not developing diabetes. Whatever we were doing in allopathic medicine for the last 15 years has been wrong if you look at the fact that every condition they're treating is getting worse and worse and worse. So we're missing the point. We're doing something wrong. And then really people only appreciate what they pay for. So you take really good care of your car, your truck, and it costs a lot of money, and that's just part of it. Whereas feeding your family and taking care of their health often gets a back seat to shopping or going to football games or things like that. And when people say, well, my prescription costs $1,000, but I only had to pay my copay, someone had to pay that $1,000, and then you're back looking at health care for everyone, where the healthy people that don't use their insurance, don't get expensive prescriptions, are simply putting money into the pot to pay for people's pharmaceuticals. And there's a huge, it's just about making money.
Mm-hmm.
So to break it down simply, let's look at this in a different perspective. I put bad gas in my car. I've got to take it to my mechanic. He's going to tell me I put bad gas in it, and he's going to tell me it's going to cost me X amount of dollars to fix it. However, if I were to put good gas in the car, I wouldn't have this problem. Is it any different with your body by putting good nutrition in or putting bad nutrition? And we know the outcome. The problem is, how do you convince people that this is the problem? And how do we get around this? People seem to be very resistant when you start talking to them about diet. I've found that with many people. Dr. Bottrill?
I think, Bob, that was a very good analogy. However, it's been my experience that a lot of families do want to do the right thing for their children. It gets down to how expensive organic foods are. Their funds are limited. They're motivated a lot of times to do their best, but I think financially it's a real struggle for them.
How would you compare this problem, ADHD, and the current spike in the past 2 decades of children diagnosed with autism syndrome? As I understand it, the number is now 1 in 48, and back in the 1970s was 1 in 1,000. That's an unbelievable move upward, and there has to be a cause for this effect. Dr. Hartford?
There has to be a cause, or there are multiple causes, whether it's heavy metals used in vaccines to stimulate an immune response, whether it's Roundup sprayed on corn just before it's harvested as a desiccant. It's something in our environment. I've read studies that by 2025, nearly all boys will be born with some type of autism. And so I hate to be pessimistic about the future, but I'm afraid in the current financially driven arena with the pharmaceutical companies and that the problem's going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, looks like we don't have an awful lot of time left, but I'd like to thank both of you for joining us this evening and offering your insights into this ADHD, and especially on the nutrition side of this. This is Bob Neugebauer signing off for Healthy Conclusions. We hope you will join us again at the same time next Sunday for another hour of informative talk on nutrition, exercise, and alternative medicine options. Sponsored by AltruaHealthShare.org, 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. Good night.